Recording. All right, hey everybody. Welcome to an experiment. This is Rob. Normally I do this just with no, I don't know, no other people really. But today I actually wanted to have a conversation with Joe Rand, the executive director of the Broker Public Portal. He was named last year, I believe, along with his incredibly cute dog in the background.
Yeah, one of my dogs.
That's right. And also with me is the new senior associate of 7DS, Grant McCandless. Say hi, Grant.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. And we're
Hi,
actually
Grant.
trying to record this on video because we have this thought that maybe that will make it more interesting, but we'll see what ends up happening. We might release this podcast first. So
listen, I'm a first child, so I'm used to being experimented upon. My parents did that for me for years, made all their mistakes on me, and then perfected the art of parenting for my brothers.
Yeah, I'd like to say the same, except I don't know. I mean, my younger brother had a much rougher time. So anyway, it's so great to see you, man. Joe's one of my favorite people in the industry. We argue a lot. We eat lots of meat at Korean barbecue, and then we go sing. He's an incredible singer, but I mean, he's also incredibly smart. So I just figure, most people probably know who you are, Joe, but maybe for anybody who might not, just a quick 1 minute intro, your background, like how you ended up in this position. Yeah.
Well, my family, my mom started a real estate company about 40 years ago in New York suburbs, the northern suburbs of New York City. It's been a suburban company since that. It's grown significantly since then. I never thought I'd go into the business. I got my license at 18 and I sold during summers and things like that. I made beer money. I get one sale in the summer. That's beer money for the next year of college. That gets me through. But I never thought I'd get back into the business. I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to college, law school. Then I decided I wanted to be a law professor. I did a clerkship and then went and did a fellowship at Stanford that was supposed to lead to an academic career, but I didn't love it. I loved teaching. I love teaching, but academia, you get ahead by writing a bunch of stuff that no one's ever going to read, and that wasn't my style. And so about 20 years ago, my brothers, who had gone into the business with my mom, pulled me in, and I started working for the Rand Realty Company, which has gone through a couple of different franchise affiliations in its history, but we've always been in New York and New Jersey. I did a lot of teaching for the company. I started to develop a lot of teaching materials. Those eventually became 2 books that I published, and that led to a lot of speaking and a lot of going around the country. And eventually, I got an opportunity to go work with the Broker Public Portal as their executive director. They never had one before. That's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. While I still have a hand in the real estate company, just I now divide my time a little bit.
Right. So Broker Public Portal, it's been around a long time, and I can't think of a better executive director. I mean, I was like, that makes so much sense.
Thank you.
And I'm sure because we talked about it a little bit before the show. Grant and I just published that giant, massive report on CoStar, and I'm like, you can't talk about CoStar without talking about Homesnap, obviously, because that's how we got aware of them. You can't talk about Homesnap without talking about Broker Public Portal. So I felt like the timing is perfect. And we wanted to talk to you before this, but it's like, so.
You set up a time to talk with me on a podcast. And then about 3 days before the podcast, you release a 100-page report on the company I work for. Thank you for that. That's really nice. I appreciate it. Don't give me any lead time.
Dude,
you spent 2 months writing it.
You're a former law clerk. I mean, you probably read it in about 4 hours. I mean,
it took a while. It took a while to get through it. It was very detailed and very good, and very smart. And I learned a lot, actually, stuff I didn't know about CoStar in its other iterations, the other companies it owns and what it does. And about its basic operations. And I thought it was really great. And I would really recommend, I want people to know, I paid my money for it. You didn't send me.
Thank you.
It's worth the money. It's worth investing in knowledge and to pay people for the intellectual property they put out. I say that as someone who's selling $19 books on Amazon. So, my stuff's a lot cheaper. If you want to buy it,
but your audience is much larger.
It's a larger audience.
It's like
that's true. Yeah, there's not. You don't get it. There's not a big, bestseller appeal to a report on CoStar. But I will say I really did think it was a really good in-depth report, and people who are interested in this area should definitely review it.
And after we're done with this show, we will certainly have a conversation about bulk purchases for the entire board of the Broker Public Portal.
I gotta get reimbursed for it. Like I paid for it on my own credit card.
But so before we kind of dive into, because that's obviously what it's the most interesting about all of this, but maybe give everyone just like a real brief history of BPP, how it came about and how it sort of is where it is today, and then we could talk about today and tomorrow.
Yeah, BPP came out probably about 6-7 years ago. It was an initiative started by a collaboration of big brokers, largely big brokers, and MLSs. And the idea at the time was that they saw the power that Zillow and the other portals were accumulating, and they were fishing upstream on consumer behavior. And so they thought, well, what if we created a competitor to Zillow, to Trulia, to Realtor.com? But the competitor was bound by rules, by guidelines, that it couldn't do certain things like monetize listings. And that's where the fair display guidelines came from. Fair display guidelines, the FDG, those were a set of protocols, a set of rules that govern how the portal would treat the listing. So principally, the idea was, your listing, your lead, you cannot monetize listings by putting ads of competing brokers. You have to show the listings, in a fair display, put out fairly, and really the biggest point was, don't take my listing. If I'm a broker, don't take my listing and then like use it as a billboard for other people and make money off it on my work, on my intellectual property. So that was what they had this idea. They wanted to do that. And then I think I wasn't around back then. I wasn't involved in this initiative before the last year. But my sense of it is that they soon realized how expensive it was going to be to build something competitive.
Right.
And so rather than build, they followed the advice of a very smart man named Rob Hahn, who wrote back in 2015, I think, that they should just buy something. And they didn't buy something. What they did was they aligned with Homesnap, which is a company that was already out, that was already following basically fair display guidelines, because it was building Homesnap around MLS, becoming kind of the functional public portal for MLSs. So it was a natural fit. They did a joint venture. They created something that no one really understands called the National Broker Portal, the NBP, which is a subsidiary or a joint venture between the BPP and Homesnap. And then with that, Homesnap agreed to follow fair display guidelines. Homesnap agreed to a certain financial relationship with BPP, and BPP, to its part, helped Homesnap spread around the country by basically acting as a stamp of approval that BPP says you can trust Homesnap because it's following the fair display that BPP put together.
Right. Okay.
And that's where we find ourselves. I got pulled in over the summer with the idea that Homesnap still hasn't closed the loop on every MLS in the country, and they wanted someone to proselytize and get out there and be an evangelical to say to these MLSs, get aboard. We need everybody aboard, because Homesnap is stronger if it's got 100% coverage throughout the country than if it's still missing some gaps.
But Homesnap right now in BPP, I guess, as a result is what, 75, 90%? I mean, it's north of 90%, right?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know the numbers. It's like 1.1 million agents have access to it. I think that's probably 80-90% of the agents. There's a lot of, I would say, a handful of big MLSs that are still not part of it. There's a bunch of little ones that are not part of it. The problem for us from Homesnap, and you're right, we have a lot of coverage, so that's good. You know what the problem is that, and I'll give you the specific example of Howard Hanna, which is the company, my real estate company, aligned with last year. The very smart people at Howard Hanna. I'm not part of their bigger operation, the Howard Hanna operation, so I can speak to it. That Howard Hanna, who's been a big proponent of BPP from the beginning, they really want to support Homesnap. The problem is that Howard Hanna is big enough that it's in, I don't even know, dozens, maybe 100 different MLSs.
Right.
And when you're a broker and you want to push a product to consumers and you want to push it to your agents and have your agents adopt it, it needs to be available to all your agents. Because I can't go, personally, I can't go. And even for my relatively tiny company of 1,200 agents and 75 million revenue, and I'm in like 12 MLSs, but one of them's not in the BPP, not in Homesnap. So
Right.
I can't go to my agents, and it's a bigger problem for bigger companies like Howard Hanna. You can't go to the agents and say, listen, we want you to really promote and work with Homesnap and do these things with Homesnap, because when you announce it at the company meeting or at the company events, you get these other agents, well, it's not in my MLS, and then what are you supposed to do? So it's not so much that we're in a lot of MLSs, but until we close the loop, we really can't get traction with getting support and really working synergistically with all the big brokers, because every one of them has a hole somewhere. It might be a 1,500 person MLS in some backwater somewhere, but they have agents that service it, and they can't say to those agents, we're going to start promoting a program that you can't use. So it's a problem.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, you guys have 90 some odd percent. So
yeah, we're doing okay. We do well, but I want 100. I want everybody. I want to be like the Transcontinental Railroad. I want that golden spike. I want to have a ceremony when I get, Bob Hale or somebody to be the last person standing and say to Bob, drive the spike home. I want to be in Houston. Come on, Bob. Return my calls.
Is Houston not one of them? That's
Houston's
a big one.
Not one of them. HAR's not. Well, HAR's ethos is that they provide everything. So they're not.
Yeah.
They're not as open to doing, third-party stuff. So it's a work in progress. They're all works in progress.
Yeah.
I think that, sometimes the big brokers, it ends up being expensive. Sometimes for the smaller brokers, they don't have any money. The big brokers have money, but they don't like spending it. The small brokers don't have the money, or the small MLSs don't have the money. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. All right. So let's confirm one thing before, further, as you saw in the report that we did. And I think this is like to the best research I could find. And I confirmed it, but let's confirm it again. The exact relationship between BPP and Homesnap, right?
Yeah.
Well, I understand it. Well, actually, tell us what is how it actually works.
There is a joint venture between BPP and Homesnap. The joint venture has, it gets money from Homesnap because Homesnap makes money, and that fuels the NBP, the National Broker Portal, the JV. We call it the JV, to be simple. And the JV spends some of its money. It's not a lot of money the JV gets. The BPP itself is not technically a nonprofit, but it's built like
it's basically a nonprofit. Yeah,
money can't be distributed to members, and nobody makes any money from it. NBP is supposed to basically spend the money that comes into it. So neither of these things are profit-making entities. Homesnap's a profit-making entity, but not the broker public portal.
Right.
So there's this JV. The JV is 3 members from BPP, 3 members from Homesnap. 1 member who is nominated by BPP has to be approved by Homesnap. So there's 1 theoretically independent member, but it's somebody that's been approved by both sides, but was nominated by BPP. And they're the ones that make the decisions on things like what we've been talking about, the fair display guidelines. And Homesnap wants to do something, it's got to go to the joint venture board to be able to make any major changes. But on a day-to-day basis, Homesnap runs its business. I mean, the people who are on the joint venture board from the BPP side, they all have full-time jobs. I mean, the only person that now works, and it's not even full-time. The only person that works for the joint venture is me, as the executive director. That's why I'm not. You asked me, am I the CEO? I'm not the CEO because there's no employees. How do you think it's so aggrandizing? When people call themselves the CEO of a company that doesn't have anybody working there, so I'm just executive director. That's highfalutin enough for me. Yeah. And we also have we have some consultants. We have Victor Lund and his Wave Group. They do a lot of great work for both BPP and the joint venture, both public relations and consulting and things like that. So there are people that serve the joint venture, but it's not a big operation.
Sure.
And the reason they wanted me was the BPP wanted to have somebody who was responsive to them, who was kind of involved in the operational side. Because they, everything they got through Homesnap. So my job is I work with the sales and development team. We're trying to expand, and I report back on those efforts to BPP and the JV and BPP.
The specific thing that I wanted to know was, okay, as far as we can tell, the licenses, the data licenses, are held by the JV, not by BPP and not by Homesnap. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer. Here's what I can tell you is that there are a series of agreements between BPP and Homesnap that form the joint venture.
Right.
Those agreements do restrict the use of the data by Homesnap.
Right.
the data, as I understand, there are individual agreements between the MLSs and the JV. So
Then the
we go to
JV,
an MLS.
not between
Yeah,
MLS and Homesnap. That's important.
no, the agreements with the BPP MLSs, the ones that are in the BPP, are with the JV.
Right.
Those agreements are with the JV, and those agreements do individually. Every MLS has their own agreement,
Right.
and my understanding is that the data agreements are in each of those agreements
Right.
that are with the JV as a counterparty to the MLS.
Right.
And then there's an overall master agreement between Homesnap and BPP.
Homesnap and BPP or Homesnap and JV?
There's a master agreement
Okay.
between Homesnap and BPP that forms the JV.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
the data is between the JV and the MLSs for the MLSs that are in BPP. Homesnap still has some legacy clients where their relationships are governed by agreements that Homesnap has directly with them, and that's we're not involved in that.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, our goal is to move all of them into the BPP eventually, but it hasn't happened yet.
So the off-quoted dollar per member per month thing, that's going to the JV and then split between whatever Homesnap's expenses and then Homesnap's profit margin plus your salary and whatever travel expenses.
Most of it frankly goes to me. And I have an exorbitant salary that they have to.
You deserve one.
Really nothing left.
I mean,
there's
seriously,
nothing
Joe.
left after they pay me. No, most of it goes toward. It is split in some way between the Homesnap gets its piece. The other piece stays with the JV, so that is technically still half owned by Homesnap, and that goes to BPP has tax obligations, but none of it goes back to BP.
Yeah. Oh, did we lose you?
Because BPP doesn't have anything to is going to be used to being reinvested back to development, marketing, things like that. So market the JV, and they haven't been very aggressive with it. They haven't. I mean, that's one of the things I would say is that the JV has been very, they're building up that money to figure at some point they're going to do something significant with it.
I mean, to start, man, they need a leader, right? So until they brought you on, like you said, everyone's just part-time in it, once a month. Like you can't get much done like that. All right. So with all that, let's go to CoStar.
Yeah.
CoStar comes in, and like I said, I mean, I saw your tweets. I put in the report. I'm like,
yeah, I saw you tweeted.
Did these guys not know this is happening?
The tweets end up in this report. I'm like, is that a copyright? Do I get like a piece of this $250 back? It's like a whole page of my tweets.
So you guys really had no idea that this deal was going down.
All right, I'll tell you a funny story. So sometime right before Thanksgiving, I decided, I've been doing a ton of work on a bunch of things, and I said, you know what? I've been dying to start work on a new book, right? And it was the week of Thanksgiving. So I said, you know what? Nothing's going to happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to go for a couple of days. I went for the weekend to get out of the house with my kids. We went down to the Jersey Shore. We have a house at the Jersey Shore. We go down to the Jersey Shore. The kids stay for the weekend. They leave with my wife on Sunday, and I'm going to be there in my Jersey Shore house, and I'm going to spend the time. So I am settling in at my Jersey Shore house, ready for a couple of days of writing, and I'm all set. I'm watching a little football, and I'm getting ready for the next day. And I get a text from Gail Weisswasser, who's the communications director for Homesnap. And she texts me to say, can you call me? Which is very unusual because like she never reaches out to me on a weekend. So I reach out to her, I reach back, and she tells me about the CoStar deal. and literally as I call her back, I'm Googling to say, why is she calling? What's going on? I check my emails, and all of a sudden, like everything's blowing up, and I'm getting all this. And literally, like 5 minutes later, all right, I'm getting in the car, I'm going back. I'm like half an hour behind my kids who are in the car going back home because like I'm obviously not going to write the book this week. Like, forget, my whole week is now going to be about this. So yeah, that's how I found out. I mean, it quite honestly, I think the biggest impact of the CoStar acquisition hitting when it did was that it prevented me from working on my next book. And I think we can all agree that that is a rather dramatic, large scale impact in the
giant
world.
Loss. What was the book about? What was the book about?
Great loss. The book is going to be, I'm going to try to write something for a larger audience that won't just be about real estate. So I want to write about customer service and what I've learned in 20 years of trying to help agents and brokers provide better customer service to consumers in an environment which is all independent contractors and people are thought of as salespeople, and there's lots of obstacles to providing a good consumer experience, lack of control and whatnot. And I think there's some lessons there. I want the book to be about like, how do you provide like, I want to talk about amazing client experiences.
Yeah.
I've been gathering stories for years. I want to tell those stories, and I'd like to write for a larger audience because, you know, when you write a book, like your friends want to like, oh, can I read your book? I'm like, don't read my book. You're not in real estate. You're not gonna get anything out of it. Like, you're gonna think I'm a complete, you know, it's like not interesting if you're not in real estate. So I want to write something that at least I can share with the people that are not in real estate, and maybe Rob, get some speaking gigs outside the real estate circuit where they give you like $500 and a free meal to speak at their big events. And I could go talk to the insurance adjusters of America in Vegas, visit you, and they give like 20 grand or something. Some big amount for one of those keynotes. I want the big money. I need to like cash in.
Yeah, you need CES, and you need the what's it called? The AV awards, you know, the adult industry.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the big money, baby. Customer service.
The adult video news or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah. AVN awards. That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So
you're leading me out. There's so many things I want to say, which I just know that would not be good for me to talk about that. So let's move on.
Yeah. So all right. I mean, obviously, like it's happened. It's moving forward. You saw my whole take on it. I feel like, okay, Homesnap's coming in. Those guys know the industry really well. CoStar is not a real known entity. Like, have you met those guys now? Like, now it's all done. Like, have you, you know, like, what's
the
your
only
impression
person
of
from CoStar? Well, the only person from CoStar I've met is I did have a Zoom when it, like the week after it broke, and we were you know, trying to get the messaging out. I had a half-hour Zoom with Andy Florence, and that was the only time I've sat down with him was on the Zoom. I've not met, and he's a really interesting guy. I mean, your report, I think, captures it. Just really magnetic and charismatic and very smart. I enjoyed that half hour very much. I was very impressed. I've not met any of the other CoStar executives. And really, like, in my experience working for Homesnap or working for BPP for the last 6 months, I mean, I've had maybe a half dozen conversations with the leadership, you know, Guy and John and Steve at Homesnap itself. I mean, most of my interactions with Homesnap itself have been on the sales and development team where I've been working with them specifically. And the thing what's interesting, we kind of glossed over was the fact that, nobody at BPP knew about the CoStar deal. And I've asked them about that. I said, why didn't you bring us in on it? So, and their answer has been that, you know, it was very confidential. Not a lot of people knew. They were public, you know, it's a public company, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, you know, most of what, you know, the BPP agreements, what Homesnap made clear was that the BPP agreements, the Homesnap saw them, knew what the deal was, knows all the rules, knows how it works, that it wasn't sprung on them or anything like that. So, you know, we don't have any, BPP has no ownership of Homesnap. It didn't make anything from the transaction. So it's not crazy. It's like, you know, a company that we have a joint venture with did a change of control, which did not in any legal way impact us, or there were no legal rules in place that would have required them to give us notice or give us any consent or anything like that. So it's not crazy, but I agree with you that from a messaging standpoint, I certainly wish, you know, that I could have gotten out the first word about the acquisition from BPP before you did. You know, the first messaging that came out was Rob Hahn talking about how you know, CoStar is going to take over the world through Homesnap, something that you then reiterated in the red dot. And I'm sitting here like looking at this like, you know, guys, we got to get some, you know, with that FAQ, you quote the FAQ that we put out at BPP. You quoted extensively in the red dot.
It was great.
But like I wrote most of it, and like we wanted it out like the day before Thanksgiving. It didn't come out till 10 days after Thanksgiving. This is what happens, Rob, when you work with a big group of people. Everybody's got to weigh in. Lots of room of editing. I envy your ability to write, and then it's out, and something's out. So in the meantime, I put up those tweets that you then also quoted to get some, you know, to give some thought to it. But yeah, we gained nothing from it. And the messaging, and I just thought, I thought your piece on it was really interesting. And that you then followed up with the red dot about your take on what you thought the transaction was going to be like. But yeah, you were ahead of us on the messaging on that. And that was an interesting thing because we didn't have any forenotice at all. Believe me, that you know, if we had, we would have had like all sorts of stuff out like the couple of days before Thanksgiving, but
Yeah.
didn't come out till well after that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Joe, so I imagine any of our viewers who are members of the public portal or users of Homesnap, their app, are wondering what the CoStar acquisition means for the relationship between BPP and Homesnap. Is it going to change that relationship at all?
Here's what I can say about that, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not privy. I have not been in any meetings with either the leadership of Homesnap or with Andy Florence, with people at CoStar, to say what their plans are. What we have heard is what we have written. I will say this. I understand Rob's point in the red dot, as well as the article you wrote in November, December, where you kind of posit the idea that CoStar's ultimate aim is to be the white knight that rolls in when the MLSs get knocked out of their responsibility to do cooperation and facilitate offers of compensation and cooperation, that the MLSs will then be distraught and broken, and then CoStar comes in for it. And that's, I think it's a really interesting hypothesis. I don't have any reason to, I don't know, I have no personal knowledge about it, but I will give you my perspective on it, which is the first thing I will tell you is that having been working for Homesnap really from the summer, and then being more involved with the sales effort from September on, and then dealing with, with the announcement, and then having our mutual friend Greg Robertson make fun of me for saying that we were going to beat out Zillow, and he said I must have been high when I said that, which I wasn't. When I said that, I wasn't high, but I thought it was very, very. He was. I mean, he was generally very nice to say that I was the right person for the job, but he said, well, how can you possibly think that? And that was really what I dealt with I've been working for Homesnap. Is like everyone said, well, Homesnap's getting its butt kicked by Zillow. Nothing's going to change that. Homesnap's an also ran. It's an X place in the portals, and then like from Thanksgiving to like a week after Thanksgiving, I got a week later, I got Rob Hahn writing, Homesnap is going to take over the world. They're the dragon. They're the like. I was like, what? What happened? What? It's amazing what a $35 billion company popping in and getting involved can change the discussion and the dialogue. But here's what I have an issue with, and I would tell people, stop right now and go read the red dot, put down your money, read the red dot, come back so you know what we're talking about. But your basic hypothesis is that that CoStar buys Homesnap, and then it buys some sort of MLS software, which gets it in the door. You thought it might be CoreLogic. It still might be. It might be somebody else, but that deal, there's been a deal announced on that. And then, working off the Zillow derangement syndrome, and working off the fact that these NAR lawsuits might turn into a real problem for MLS's facilitating cooperation, that CoStar then steps into it. Here's why I don't think that's why I think you're off on that. Here's why I think you're off. Number one, I think you're basically taking a couple of mid to low probability events and stacking them on top of each other like a Jenga board, and saying the end result, every one of those things has to happen in order for the end result to happen. And I just don't know that all those things could happen. We've already seen there's an issue now with trying to get into the door with CoreLogic. But to your point, CoStar made an offer, so I think that you're half right. They wanted to, so I think that bears you up from that perspective. The bigger issue I have with is that I think that you're really smart. You're a smart guy. You got that big Harvard Yale brain. Is that what you did? Harvard and Yale?
I got the Yale brain. Yeah, Grant's got the Harvard brain.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I got like this little medium-sized Georgetown brain.
Oh, shut up! You got the
Harvard,
Stanford brain. You got the law professor brain. Get out of here.
I didn't get into Harvard. Twice I applied. College or law school. So,
you don't want to go to Harvard anyway.
And then I tried to get a fellowship there, and I didn't get there either. So I actually got turned out 3 times. I mean, I'm like, they literally have my name, my picture on the wall. Like, don't let this guy in no matter what. So anyway, with my little tiny brain, I look at this, I say, you know what? I think that smart people, they look at these things and they want it to be more than it is, than it obviously is. And I think like the classic, you're hearing the hooves and you're thinking zebra, and I hear the hooves and I think it's just another horse. Like I look at this and I say, well, let's think about CoStar, what they do. They do three things really in their commercial side. Not like apartments.com and the other businesses they own, but in their CoStar groups, the CoStar flagship line. They have the functions that are similar to MLS in the fact that they manage the inventory database, which they started doing in the 80s when he started the company. So they have some quasi MLS functions. That's number one. Number two, they do advertising for agents who spend money to advertise the properties to consumers. And then three, through LoopNet, they manage a consumer search portal where people can see the listings. And I think you did an excellent job in the red dot of explicating how those different features of CoStar work together and the financing and how the money works and all that kind of thing. Homesnap does number two and number three. Homesnap does the agent promotional marketing and it has the consumer portal. It doesn't have anything to do with the MLS. You're positing that CoStar is going to come in on the residential sphere and want to do all three. My point is that I think they're just fine doing two and three. I don't think they want to be an MLS. I don't think they need to be an MLS. I think that they can make scads of money on this deal by ramping up what Homesnap did, and Homesnap was profitable at, without a huge amount of traffic, that Homesnap can be more profitable, do a ton more business. And I think on top of that, I think that, you give Andy credit for being really smart, and he's smart. He went to Princeton, another school that didn't let me in, but only once this time. They don't have a graduate school for law. He's got that Princeton brain, and you think because he's got that Princeton brain, he sees coming down the line the death of the MLS and he's going to swoop in. I think what he sees not down the line, but right now is a path that no one else is on, which is that they've cleared the lane for him doing advertising. Everybody's moving into the referral fee model. Everybody's trying to eat off the commission plate. Nobody's saying to the agents, hey, here's a way for you to advertise your listing. Give us $50 and we'll put it on all these different channels and things like that. I hear horses, Rob. And let's have this discussion. Because I would say you hear zebras.
All right, so I let you go because I want to hear the full idea.
Yeah,
but
I appreciate that. I let you go on for 100 pages.
You're a Georgetown educated lawyer who clerked for a federal judge. It was federal judge, right? Was it appellate or district?
It was appellate, Second Circuit.
See, I mean, so it's not just district. I mean, you're the motherfucking man. So, given that,
are we allowed to curse on this podcast?
Of course,
I can use. Oh, now here we go.
We're gangsta up in here. So, look, before we even get any further, from your sort of litigation legal perspective, do you think the commission lawsuits win, or do they lose? Who wins those? Because that's the core of all this, right? I'm just
the core of your argument is that it doesn't work if the commission lawsuits lose. Yes.
If the commission lawsuits lose and cooperation compensation is maintained, then then we just maintain the system we've had for the last 50 years. I'm looking at Merle, I'm looking at Sitzer, I'm looking at Leader, I'm looking at what the DOJ did, I'm looking at what the academics are saying, and I'm going, the plaintiffs win, right? What am I missing?
I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and that to some extent,
none of us know. It's a lawsuit.
I don't know, and I think that you've made a very plausible argument in a number of posts that you think that ultimately that something's going to come down that is going to restrict the ability of the MLSs to regulate cooperation. Now, first thing, I think that'd be terrible for the real estate market, the housing market, if it happened. We could talk about that separately. That I think would be that's a
policy argument,
generally,
right?
That's a policy, but I think it's just a bad thing. In terms of like specifically what we're talking about, I don't know if that kills the MLSs. The MLSs do a lot of things. And they do the inventory piece, they do the cooperation and compensation facilitation. They also do a bunch of other grab bag of building, promotion and lobbying and stuff like that. But the two big ones are the inventory and the cooperation. And you're right. I mean, the thing about CoStar is CoStar in the commercial space does the inventory piece, but does not do the cooperation. Like it's never had an interest.
It doesn't exist in commercial. There's no cooperation compensation.
But they could have built it. Well, here's the thing, Rob. I know a lot of commercial brokers who wished that CoStar would step in and start publishing offers of compensation, even if it was only like to facilitate and because I mean there is a little bit of a wild west feel to commercial business where you kind of you get caught. I mean, I've had brokers. I mean, I'm a CoStar client. I've got a commercial company. I've had commercial agents that screwed up, that didn't provide for their compensation and did a deal they didn't get paid on.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
So they asked for it, but CoStar doesn't want to do it. And so you're right that here's the other thing. They don't want to do that piece. You're positing that they would love to do the inventory management piece. And I don't know if that's true, because the reason that CoStar got its hands dirty with the inventory development and management and commercial was that it didn't exist. I mean, they literally went into a void that they built that business up. You know, Andy, look, hands digging down, didn't exist.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to do that in residential. There's already now this network of inventory, you know, that access, and lots of people have availability to it. And I don't know that why he would want to rebuild that or take ownership of it. There's not good money in it. You can't make money from it, really.
But Joe, like, the answer is very simple, right? You control the MLS, you kill Zillow.
You think he wants to?
Dude, he's on record as saying
kill Zillow. Zillow's
right,
not
hold
a
on a second.
broker. How is he going to kill? How is he going to single out Zillow as a broker?
No, forget as a broker. I'm saying, let's start with this, right? He's on record as saying the company that figures out the advertising model, the one that you said, hey, pay us $50, we'll put it everywhere. He's on record as saying that company's worth $200 billion.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Zillow is doing something different now. Zillow's now, I honestly can't follow where Zillow's going. I got their iBuyer thing. They've been doing that, but now they're becoming a broker. I don't know. They're going to have agents working in-house. They're going to the Redfin model. That's my expectation, is that they'll be very similar to Redfin. I don't know how, I'm not sure they have 100% sure where they're going with it. The thing I always say about Zillow that I've always been impressed, and I've always been an admirer of theirs, I wrote about it in both my books. I told the story of how, they saw a need in the real estate industry, that the real estate industry wasn't answering the question, how much is my home worth? You had to go sit through a free CMA, which was basically a boiler room type meeting, like those timeshare meetings in the Poconos that they make you go to, the free weekend if you sit through the listing presentation. And they saw need, and they put this estimate out, and I'm not even sure they knew what their path was going to be to monetize it. They just said, let's get lots of eyeballs and we'll figure it out later. And they did. And I think to some extent they're figuring out what they're going to do. My expectation is that they'll do something like Redfin, but I don't see would having inventory control where, all the listings are now going to all the brokers and Zillow's a broker. I don't see where CoStar destroys Zillow that way.
Because we put it in the red dot, man. Like, you just have to, it's rules that apply to all brokers that just happens to screw Zillow even more, right?
Well,
it's not like CoStar wants
to
compete
against money that way anymore. That's not what they're doing to make money. They're not doing. Dude,
they're doing $1 billion in revenue.
What I'm saying is they're not trying to make money that way anymore. They're gonna have their own agents, and they're gonna get their leads, and they're gonna give it to their agents. They might, in some cases, like Redfin does, refer them out to other agents. But they're not making money on advertising anymore.
No, I just don't buy that. I don't buy that for a second. I don't think Zillow goes that route unless they're forced to, right? And I wrote that in a blog post, like, don't. And then people are all mad at me. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to incite violence here. I'm just pointing out Zillow has zero interest in doing that unless the industry forces them to, but that's a whole other topic. However, this topic brings us right back to where we started. Fair display guidelines.
Okay. Yes.
Because obviously that's where things get really into conflict. I mean, fundamentally, the problem is Zillow has this business model where they have a listing and they say, okay, you want to inquire about this house, we'll send it out to these buyer agents who are paying us. Mm-hmm. Fair display guidelines and BPP says that is no good. We need all of that to come back to the listing agent or listing broker. Is there a difference for BPP?
I think they allied the difference a little bit. Like, I think it's the listing broker. The listing broker has the listing, but generally speaking, what that means is it goes back to the listing agent, because the listing brokers basically facilitate that.
So the idea would be then Homesnap or whatever, right? Because I theorize that CoStar maybe acquires a big portal as well, but say it's Homesnap, right? So the idea is under Homesnap, every inquiry would go to the listing agent, right?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. Well, all the inquiries on a property go to the listing agent if that's what they're inquiring about. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's the problem, right? I mean, that's the problem with Zillow's model from BPP's perspective.
Well, except that that's true for it was built, the guidelines were built for MLS websites, or portals, right? Zillow is now a broker. So Zillow doesn't need to refer leads to the listing broker any more than randrealty.com needs to refer. If we have a Weicker listing and someone says, I want to find out more about this Weicker listing, we don't send it off to Weicker with our compliments. It goes to one of our agents. So Zillow can do the same thing. Zillow doesn't have to abide by fair display guidelines if it's got a brokerage website. So that's a big deal. Like, they don't have to do that. That's why they did it.
Is that a big deal, Joe? Because that's the thing.
They have
I've
a ton
always
of traffic. That's why it's a big deal. They have a ton of traffic.
Nah,
they have all the eyeballs.
But this is the thing that I never understood about fair display guidelines, right? And you and I have had some arguments about it, but this is going back 10 years. Because what I always felt about it was, if you're going to oppose syndication, you have to oppose IDX, right? So there's no rationale that I can make sense of. So maybe you could explain it to me.
Here's the thing. Okay.
If it's my listing, my lead, and the justification is, and I'm looking at the fair display guidelines website right now, right?
Yeah.
That the listing agent is the one who knows the property the best. So
Yes.
the consumer is not served well if they're coming in and asking questions and the agent has no idea, right? Like, if I'm a buyer agent, I get this lead, buyer's like, so tell me about 1-3 Main Street. And I'm like, I don't know.
I never been there.
Right,
Yeah,
I never been
exactly.
there. Versus the listing agent, oh, 1-3 Main Street, it's this, it's got whatever, right? Granite countertops, right?
Mhm.
That's the idea. But that problem exists with IDX just as much. If Rand Realty gets a Weicker listing, a Rand Realty agent has no idea about this listing, right?
They certainly have no more idea than they would
A
based
Zillow
on
agent,
Zillow
right?
or anybody
Right.
else. Yes, exactly.
So my thing is, if you are actually pushing for fair display guidelines, don't you then have to say that's no good too? Why are you making an exception for brokers?
Let me explain it. I'll be happy to explain that. The difference with IDX versus fair display is that fair display was designed to cover portals that are not broker resources, that were MLS resources or third-party portals. If on IDX, the basic exchange of IDX is the idea that I'm a broker, I take listings, you're a broker, you take listings.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. In order for my website to have any kind of currency, I have to have all the listings. Because if I only have my own listings, and my website's not as effective, it's not, people want to see all the listings. And you're the same way with your website. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the IDX, we're going to do the exchange.
Yeah.
And I'm giving you all my listings, you give me all your listings, and we do that all the way across, all the brokers reciprocating across.
Yeah.
But if they're on my website, that's my website. So if they're not my client yet, but they're my consumer, because they're on my website looking at a listing on my website. So if they want to make an inquiry on the listing, we're gonna have to give them, because IDX says you have to. We're gonna have to say this listing is a white crib listing somewhere, usually buried very far down the list, below the walk score, below the air quality score. Like, oh, there's some more boilerplate. Then down here it says it's a white crib listing. But it's there. It's on the page. But I get the lead, and Weicker gets their leads because we showed up to the party with listings. They have listings. I have listings. We all came together. We brought our listings to the table. The difference with a portal is that the portal wasn't bringing listings to the table. They're not bringing anything. They're just basically a display point for the listing. So the idea was, no, you don't get our leads off our listings. That comes back to us, the listing agent. And so that's why, I don't get
So Joe,
to me, Zillow is a broker now.
So Joe, does that apply to if I have a brokerage and I have one listing a year?
Yeah.
But I do 1,000 deals. I do 1,000 transactions feeding off of your listings. Am I still granted that?
Yes.
Because okay, fine.
The case.
Okay, so that answers that question. The BPP's position is, as long as you have one listing a year, you could take all of our leads and monetize it as you want.
I don't know if you have to have any listings. I think you just have to agree that if you take a listing, you get to share in the IDX. Well,
but what I mean is you're not opposed to it, right? But my point is you're not opposed to it.
Well, I think that's the theory. That's the exchange. That's the deal. The deal is I get listings, I put them in, you get listings, you put them in.
Right.
The other deal is that I get listings, I put them out, I make offers of compensation, and they're blanket offers of compensation,
sure,
regardless of whether you made any offer of compensation to me.
To follow on that,
let me just talk about that.
Okay, go ahead.
I make the offer of compensation that applies to you and applies to all the brokers, regardless of what their offer of compensation is to me. So I don't get to go in, at least not automatically, and say, well, I'm offering you X% because that's what you're offering me. I offer out everybody X%. And it might be that I'm offering out X% to you. And when you take a listing, you offer out half X to the brokers, and I live with that. That's one of the frustrations that we've always had.
Sure.
You know, with free riders in the system, people
Sure.
that don't take listings,
Sure.
people that work with buyers, and when they take a listing, they put out, you know, not a workable commission, you know, not a make your money back, make a reasonable profit on the commission,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the deal. Yeah, I'm used to that deal.
Fine, but the second part of this is this is what I'm trying to understand about fair display guidelines, right? The entire rationale for fair display guidelines is consumer benefit, right? Namely, that the listing agent is the best informed source for the consumer to find out about that property.
I would say it's one of the purposes of fair display. I think the
okay. What's the other one?
Two purposes. It's really, well, it's the industry. It's to reward the listing agent for actually contributing the inventory. That, and really what it comes down to is this. This is the part that always drives me crazy. You know, because you in your red dot, you must say that Zillow is consumer centric like 5 times, and every time you say it, I want to just like bang my. Yeah, okay. It's because you're making the whole point that the consumer centricity of when somebody says, I want to find out about this listing, give me more information about the listing, and they send it to some guy that bought the zip code who's never seen a listing. How is that consumer centric? I'm trying to sell my property. I want leads going to my listing agent. I don't want my leads going to some guy that bought the zip code. I want the listing agent, because the listing agent makes money if he sells my house. That guy who bought the zip code, he doesn't make money when he sells. So how is it consumer centric to me as the listing agent when you're sending my leads out? How is it consumer centric to me as the buyer when you're sending me to someone who never seen the property? That's not consumer centric. The fair display guidelines are consumer centric, but they are also, yes, industry friendly as well, because the idea is that you as the listing agent, you're in the best position to answer the question, and it's your listing. So why should someone else get the leads off your listing? That's you know, like the way Florence tells it.
I know,
he says,
Joe.
Nobody else gets to put a sign in the front of the yard.
I know.
There's no other signs in the front of the yard but mine.
Except that when the sign says IDX, then all of a sudden other people can put their signs in the yard. So here's the question: when will the BPP oppose IDX?
When will BPP oppose IDX? That's you love the zebras. You love
I do. It's what I do, Joe. Come on, man. But look, it's intellectually dishonest to talk about fair display guidelines. You're listing your lead and then support IDX or tolerate.
No, I
IDX.
don't think it's well, put it this way. I think what you're positing is the idea that in IDX, don't you get free riders, and don't those free riders take advantage of the fact that they get to show all my listings and they get the leads off my listings on their website?
And it harms consumers.
And well, yeah, I mean, but those consumers are on that guy's website.
But he shouldn't be. So
So
that guy should be forced to send the lead back to the listing agent. That guy should be forced to say, "Great, thanks for visiting my website."
It's his client.
How's it his client? They have signed nothing.
Guy walks into Macy's. Yeah. You know, he's a Macy's client. He's a Macy's.
That's because Macy's has the inventory.
If he's on the Weicker website.
That's because Macy's has the inventory.
If he's on the Macy's website, Macy's doesn't send them off to go to the Nike website to go buy sneakers. They keep them there. That's the idea. No, listen, what I understand your point.
Right.
I get it. IDX can be very frustrating, and I don't discount the idea that IDX might prove in the modern environment to be problematic, particularly when if those lawsuits do go the way you think they're going to go, and there's a problem with offers of compensation. It's like that's the whole problem. Is that. Right. And we can talk about that now if you want, like why I think that those lawsuits going through and destroying the model whereby MLS regulates offers of compensation and provides that essential market function to provide a fluid and transparent market, that if that goes away, I think the next thing that goes away is IDX, because there's no way I'm putting my listings on somebody else's website. If I want all the leads going to me, I don't want, I don't care. And you know what then will happen?
What?
Rob, you know what happens then?
What?
If I want to buy a car today, I want to buy a $50,000 luxury sedan. I got to go to the Lexus place, then I got to go to the Infinity place, then I got to go to 5 different types of cars and multiple dealerships within each. There might be this Lexus dealer and Lexus dealer in Paramus, and then the one over in Westchester. I got to go to both of them.
Right.
And it's really a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I can't work with, and when I go onto the showroom floor, is anybody working for me? No. I walk in, I'm at the mercy of that sales agent who sells cars every day, and I
Right.
buy a car once every 3 years.
Yeah.
Total disadvantage.
Yeah.
Buying a car stinks, and everybody knows it. You know what? Buying a house is great. It's awesome. I can go to a Rand agent, and that Rand agent can show me the entire inventory of virtually any home for sale. And then when I go to look at it, he's on my side or she's on my side. She represents me through the whole process. She guides me through the process. She gives me unvarnished advice. She's my fiduciary the way a lawyer is. It's a great deal for me as a consumer that this whole system works because of buyer agency. And that's why I have a frustration with this lawsuit and with all the people that want to kill the MLS and think that this adds cost. It doesn't add cost, because you know what happens is it creates this transparent and fluid market that it's a really well operating, well oiled market. So yes, you know what homes sell for? They sell what their market price is. You don't get people like it's a car that someone buys that sedan today for $50,000, and then somebody else buys it for 48, because I know what the house down the block sold for. You're not going to get me to pay 20% more than the house down the block sold for. Perfect information on both sides. It's a great system. It works beautifully. House prices doing great.
Joe,
and
man,
you want to kill it. You want to kill it, Rob Hahn.
I don't want to kill it. Am I suing NAR? No.
You're rooting for those lawsuits. You want
no, I'm analyzing it like from, and that's so I started asking you, like, as a lawyer, as a legal academic, like, what do you think their chances are? You know,
so yeah, I think their chances are decent. Yeah. I will say this. Here's my point: is that yes, I think if you do eliminate the MLS function for regulating compensation, I think you run the risk of then destroying IDX. The way the pocket listings would destroy IDX, yeah. And then it would be a worse real estate market. Not just necessarily a worse real estate industry, but a worse real estate market.
I look, all my clients are MLSs. Like, the last thing I want is for these lawsuits to succeed. I'm just saying, intellectually honest, I just got to look at the facts that are being pleaded and go, holy crap, right? I mean, that's all I'm saying. Right.
I respect that. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
I think just like you and Brad Inman, I think get the rap that you're like the doomsayers of the industry. And people are always mad at Brad. They're always mad at you. Yeah. But like, I think you guys both play it straight. I think you have an affinity, both of you, for the exotic. And like I said, the zebras. I think you both have an affinity for the zebras. And like, Brad has never met a business model that would destroy the real estate industry that he hasn't been fascinated by. He's fascinated by all of them, puts them all on stage. They all get like prime placement. You know, if you go up and BPP, has BPP ever been on stage at Inman? It's a function. It was a creation of like the 60 of the biggest brokers in the country and all the biggest MLSs. Pure industry. Never got even. I don't think it ever got mentioned on the Inman stage because it's an industry inside thing. It's not trying to destroy the industry. But if I go into my basement and create some sort of funky app that like could destroy, I'll be like new kid on the block #2, and I'll get like front page treatment on Inman.com. And I think that's fine because Brad has a perspective. Yeah. I think you have a perspective. Right. You're really smart and you see these things and you see danger around the corner. And I respect you for setting off the flares for us. That's your job. You do it very well.
It's my, because, as a consultant, I'm like, hey, I'm adding value. It's like, look, it's not going to happen the next week, right? It's just, from a strategy standpoint, you got to think about this. You got to at least do some sort of contingency planning, right? You got to do some sort of prep. Like, if I'm a broker, if I'm a franchise, if I'm an MLS, I got to look at these lawsuits and not just go, it'll never happen. Like, that's an irrational response, right? The rational response is really to say, it's probably not going to happen, right? Because like Joe said, Rob likes to see zebras. It's just a horse, right?
It's a horse.
But what if it's a zebra?
Yeah.
So, hey, do we have any, zebra traps? Let's invest in some zebra traps.
Let's at least put a little money. Let's put a little money into zebra trap, just in case it's a zebra. Yeah, I think that's right.
Saying. Yeah.
And you know what? I always say, and I think you're right. I mean, that's my point. Is that I think that's why I said it's really important to read that, because I think you need to know like what there's a low probability but high impact.
Correct.
A possible eventuality. And the thing, I'll tell you this because you should share this. Whenever somebody gives you that guff about like you're so negative about this, and they say you're crying wolf, at the end of the damn story, there was a wolf and he ate all the townspeople. So yes, Peter cried wolf a couple of times, and everybody's like not taking him seriously. But at the end of the day, there was a wolf.
Yeah,
there was a wolf.
And the size of the wolf matters. It reminds me. Remember that that Japanese nuclear reactor meltdown a few years back, right? That's a low probability event. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
multiple systems, like all sorts of really smart engineers and people figured shit out. When that low probability event happens and the result is that, you want to have some prep, you want to have some contingency plans. You know,
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know when I forget when you started doing this. When did you start like doing your consulting?
09.
Oh, nine. So like
Yeah.
you were about 4 or 5 years after Zillow came on the scene.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think that, you look back, there were people. I mean, there was the famous, what was it, Bill Chi with the lions over the
Lion
hill,
over the hill.
and
Yeah.
the lion over the hill. I mean, there were people that saw that what Zillow could become, and they warned everybody. And then everybody was like, wait, I can syndicate my listings for free and you'll do all my advertising, and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's free. Well, then sure, let's do it.
Oh, dude, I have a
And
story about that. So I remember meeting Zillow and Trulia when they were first coming up, because at the time I was working for Realogy, right? Sendent. Now it was a low level, like senior director of interactive something for commercial, right? But because of that, I knew about CoStar. I knew about syndication. I knew how difficult it was to syndicate to CoStar, which is a whole other thing, right? And so Trulia and Zillow come in, they're like, we want your listings. And I'm like, I'm commercial, so I got nothing to do with this. However, I'm looking at this going, there's a huge value here. I remember writing a memo, because I'm a dumbass 20-something, thinking somebody's going to pay attention to it, saying, we should acquire this Zillow company.
wow.
Like Sendent should make a big, just give them the data, but make as condition, we should take like a 40% stake in this startup. Because I think the syndication thing that doesn't happen in commercial is going to be really, really big in residential. Obviously, they didn't. Imagine if they did. Imagine if Realogy owned 40% of Zillow.
You know what? The only thing I would say that yes, except that then Zillow wouldn't be Zillow. It'd be something
That's
else.
true.
It would have been
else. Yeah.
It would have been something else, and then Realogy would have, who knows how they would have managed that process. But then there would have then Truly would have come and then
Or
done
something, right? Something
Zillow
would have
did.
happened. Yeah.
But I think your larger point is, and I think this is something that people sometimes miss. I mean, like, is you are the voice in the you're the warning crier. You're the hey, listen, this is more than you think it is. Like, and
I'm Rob the Baptist. I'm the voice in the wilderness.
And you know why you're Rob the Baptist. Here's why.
You're Jesus. I'm Rob the Baptist.
and here's why specifically your role is so important, is because the real estate industry in particular is an industry of every single person in the industry is their own entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The brokers are big entrepreneurs, the agents, the person sells 4 homes a year, they're an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs, the whole culture of entrepreneurship is focus on the positive. It's all that they're all going to hear these speakers, they're all going to believe in themselves, and they're buying The Secret, and they're who's the big guy that does all the walk across coals and stuff? What's his name?
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. They're all going to Tony Robbins seminars and getting fired up, and they can believe nothing bad can happen. You just focus on the goal. You write the goal down. You put the goal on the piece of paper. You see it. You got a vision board, and all you have to do is and then you work toward it. And like, don't think about the negative. Don't focus on the negative. A lot of times, they don't even think about the negative. And that's why people get frustrated, I think, with you and with Brad for the same reason, that, you're intruding on my happy life with all these dire predictions. Brad brings Urban Compass on stage, and everybody's like, oh my God, he loves these guys. And he has had them on stage like every event for like 10 years.
In my defense, the sales agent and that they are not my audience. I don't want to talk to them, because to your point, I recognize, right, that the power of positive thinking. I've done sales, and you have to believe. Like, no, you cannot let negative thoughts enter your mind. My audience is the CEOs whose job it is, I think, to think about those negative things so that their agents don't have to. Right?
Agreed.
It's the
Except
MLS
you know what?
CEO, so that members don't have to.
Agreed. 80% of those CEOs, you know where they got the job of being CEO?
Yeah, I know.
They were real estate agents, and they were really successful. They became brokers, and they started running their own companies. So there's still, that's what my whole point is, that the whole culture of this business is instilled. Yes, there are companies, I think, that have CEOs that have the proper, you look at like Berkshire Hathaway, you look at the big companies, Realogy. I think those people come from a different culture, but 90% of the brokerages are run by people who came up in the industry as an agent, and they have that very positive, focused mindset. And the danger, and let's bring it back to what we're talking about with CoStar, is that, the danger is that you discount the long tail probabilities of high impact events, that there's a possibility that something really bad could happen. And I don't disagree with you that it would be very smart for MLSs, for BPP, for all of these organizations who are supposed to some extent put up the guardrails to protect the traditional industry, for them to be aware of like what's one possible path in an infinite number of universes. What's one plausible path for CoStar to go? And if you don't want that to happen, what do you do about it? And that's, right. I think to some extent, like that's going to be what 2021 is about.
Or, whether you want it to happen or not happen, if it does happen, how then should you modify your business? How then should you think about, how you deal with that changing environment? That's basic. Yeah. So speaking of that, I have to ask you this question before I let you off, right?
Okay.
And we could just go. I mean, I could talk to you for 4 hours. I don't care.
I'm here as long as you want.
This is a whole Joe Rogan style thing. But fair display guidelines. Okay. I think I'm one of the people who looks at this and goes, if this really does get implemented at a national level, right? Mm-hmm. Like whatever ends up happening, say CoStar comes about or however it's done, the MLSs all agree or something. I'm trying to
destroy buyer leads.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how buyer agency survives that.
All right. First of all, I'm just going to clarify again the idea that the fair display guidelines apply to third-party portals and MLS sites. Doesn't apply to a broker site if it's overridden by IDX. But to your larger point about the fair display guidelines, because I
think you guys should oppose IDX, to be intellectually honest, but that's a whole other thing.
I read the thing about IDX is that you brought a pot to the potluck. The portals don't bring a pot; they bring a knife and a fork to the potluck. They're not bringing something to the party. Even a broker who took one listing last year, he contributed something.
Joe, to the potluck. Hold on. So let's be honest. Let's be honest.
You got to bring
let's
food
be
if
honest.
you want to eat.
Hold on. Let's be honest. If Zillow started off doing one listing because they are an iBuyer, they could just say, "Here's a listing," right? You're telling me that the industry would look at okay, good. Zillow's just one of us now. That's not going to happen. I
don't think the industry would look at Zillow and say, okay, this is good in any circumstance or situation.
No matter what they did.
But my point is that I am used to an industry where I have tons of competitors. Yeah. In my markets right now, 40% of the business is done by companies that don't even have a website. That's a totally different story to talk about. But the idea is that, yes, I offer IDX to brokers that do very little business, and they might occasionally sell one of my listings. And if they ever took a listing, I don't even know about it. But to the larger point, because I think you've made a very interesting point when you argue, as you have, that this could be the end of buyer agency, the end of buyer leads. Why are buyer leads? If every lead is going to the listing agent, what leads are left? Mm-hmm. And just on a practical level, I will say is that well-designed websites generate lots of leads outside of the individual listing inquiry. So, Homesnap has never really been, I think, focused on that. But Homesnap could. Homesnap could build lots of pages that would be oriented toward buyers that might generate buyer leads that would not be tied to a particular listing. I don't know what they do with them, but they could. I
would argue that they actually have to, right? In other words, if we go to the CoStar model, right, or the REA model, which Andy Florence really admires, the idea is here's a website where the listing agent, the seller, advertises the home, right? Mm-hmm. So if leaving aside buyer leads and all this stuff for a second, then the listing agent's job is to advertise my house. Say I list my house. Your job is to advertise my house to as many people as possible and generate as much interest and generate as much inquiries.
Yeah.
As a seller, I don't care how you monetize. I don't care about any of that. I just care that you've done your job to get the most amount of interest. So if Homesnap is helping you, the listing agent, to do that, then you got to generate as many goddamn pages to generate buyer interest or buyer inquiries or whatever, because then they're helping the agent do his job, who's then helping me, the client, sell my house, right? So the fact that if they're not doing that, then it's guys, you need to do that, right? In order to support
So
any of this, you need
my
to do
point is that there are leads that websites generate that are not tied to a particular listing inquiry. That definitely happens. So that's one avenue where there still would be pure free agent buyer leads on Homesnap or any other site for that matter. There's lots of different ways to generate leads that don't come off an individual listing.
Agent profiles,
yeah, I mean,
experience.
here's 10 steps to sell a home, or 10 things you need to know about buying a home, or find out, think about the fact that
neighborhood overview,
neighborhood overview,
all about
or
NIAC.
interest rate. I mean, think about the mortgage companies, how they fish upstream, that the mortgage companies have untapped potential, which they're now trying to tap, where they could be generating those leads and handing them up to agents for whatever cut or whatever reason. Sure, all that could be done. So I don't think it's the death of buyer leads. I think your point's well taken that, we are definitely getting to the point that there should be fewer of them. And I will say this, I think it would be great for the industry on an overall basis if fewer buyers decided to hire the agent that answered their stupid email inquiry. Like, in a proper world, Robin, I know you agree with this, the average buyer should be choosing an agent because they actually vetted agents and they did their research and they asked their friends and they found somebody who was actually good, or they actually kept track and kept in touch with the agent who sold them the house in the first place, or who they, rented them a home, 2 years ago, because the agent actually did the work that they have to do to maintain and cultivate that relationship. That would be a better world. That's what I write about in my books. That's like what agents should be doing. The very fact that there is this well-developed industry of disseminating buyer leads for referrals is a failure of our industry. It is ridiculous that this is how we generate business. But it's not just that. It's I'm going to do an open house because people are going to walk in and they're going to want to buy a home with me. It's like, what are these people doing that go, who walks into, I always make a joke that people are pickier about like who cuts their hair. Like, they'll go to a hair salon, they're like, I'm not taking the up person. If I'm going to get my hair cut, I want to get a referral from a friend who's really good at cutting hair. They don't go into the salon and just take who's ever up, but they'll go into a real estate office and take who's ever up, or they'll choose the person who's sitting at their open house. So yeah, I wouldn't mind if buyer leads go away. I wouldn't mind if those listing leads, which really the buyer leads that go to the listing agent, if those were to be a smaller part of our business, and a bigger part of our business would be cultivating relationships with buyers so you can help them throughout the entire cycle of owning a home. That would be a really ideal thing. But to go to your larger point about, would buyer agency go away? No, buyer agency is not going anywhere. Buyer agency is going to be fine, because I think that people do value that they have a fiduciary relationship. I don't think they want it to be like buying a car. I think they want to maintain that relationship. And on a practical level, Rob, I've seen any number of business models where there have been brokers in my market who are discount brokers, who take listings and offer out minimal compensation to the buy side. And what has happened in those situations is that agents are taught to be more careful about getting buyer representation agreements signed, which guarantee them a minimum commission coming from the buyer, so that if they do show them a property that's offering them a half a point or whatever the number is, Justice Department.
I know.
I don't want to
$100,
actual real number.
$5.
They're offering whatever they're offering me, a green apple or whatever. They're offering me something, and it's not sufficient for my needs. That I can then make sure that I'm getting paid for the work that I've done for this buyer. And like, on a practical level, what usually happens in those situations is not that the buyer comes out of pocket to pay the agent. It's that when they make the offer to the seller, they condition the offer on the seller to a distribution of proceeds that pays the buyer's commission obligations to the buyer agent. So I don't think it goes away. I just think it gets reconfigured, which is why I think all this NAR lawsuit stuff is really, it'll just make things more complicated, but I don't think it would fundamentally change that. Because if it did fundamentally change it and an eliminated buyer agency, I think that'd be very bad for the industry. I think it'd be very bad for the housing market overall.
Okay. All right. So
did I convince you, Rob? Are you changing your ways?
No, not in the least bit.
Are you converted?
No, you know what? Not at all. Here's why, right? Because you brought up cars, right? So it turns out that there are car buyer agents.
Yeah.
I didn't know this until recently, until I got interested in Porsches. And there are people out there whose job it is to locate rare cars, right?
Rare cars, yes. Rare cars. Specialized niche, yeah.
Right. Rare cars, and then they find them and they do all the negotiation, and they are
Mhm.
fiduciary, if you will, of the buyer, and
Yeah.
they, you know, examine it, they make sure it's working condition, all of that. They negotiate the price, and then they make the purchase on behalf of the client, and the client pays them
Yeah.
usually a percentage of the acquisition cost, and I think it's like 10%, so it's not cheap,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But the big thing there is that the client pays them. If
Sure.
they were paid by the seller, that entire system would it just completely destroyed.
Well, yes, if in fact the seller could if the seller was paying them directly pursuant to an agreement between the seller and the buyer agent, but that's not the way it generally works in real estate. It's a different ballgame.
I know, but see,
But
that's the
I
thing.
see your point. But I'll also,
It's a
you know,
level
you
of detail that if you talk to the average person, it's like, oh, I lost you. No, look, that's all level of, like, you know, detail inside baseball stuff. From a consumer standpoint, it's just never gonna work. You know what I mean? So to some extent, I think the argument here is if buyer agency were to, quote, go away. And by that, what I mean is the buyer agency remains, but the buyer pays the agent. Right. And however it's done, it's through I'm going to give you a commission, a guaranteed commission. I'm going to pay $300 an hour, whatever it is. There's an argument to make that that is actually better for the consumer, right? Because that vetting that you talked about, right? That staying in touch, you know, thing that you talked about, maybe the vetting really happens if the buyer's like, I'm going to have to pay this guy $100 an hour. Let me vet this motherfucker, right? To make sure he knows what he's talking
yeah.
about. Maybe the reason why it doesn't happen is because we as an industry have for 40 years told buyers, my services are free, which the Department of Justice recently came down and said, you can't do that anymore, right?
Yes.
So maybe
it was
going
a shameful
forward,
practice.
right,
Shameful practice.
right. So going forward, maybe we will see exactly what you talked about, where buyers are going to say, you know, I actually want to ask this guy some questions. I actually want to vet this agent. Do you really know this market? Do you really know whatever it is that you're supposed to know? And maybe that's actually better for the industry as a whole. I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. It's just like typically anything that changes, everybody freaks out. It's like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Like, no, maybe it's better, right?
Yes, I agree with that. I think that something would take its place, and I don't know that it would be, you know, I don't know if I think we'd find our way through. I think there'd be a way through to continue to you know, for there to be value. I think what it comes down to, and you know, we don't have to belabor this, but I think what it comes down to is you get paid if you bring value to a relationship.
Yep.
Whether you're on the list side or the buy side, you get paid if you bring value. And I think that a lot of times we haven't brought value from the real estate industry, either on the buy side or the list side. And those inefficiencies are getting squeezed right now.
Yeah.
I think that brokers who don't bring value to their agents have been losing agents. I think that agents who don't bring value to their consumers are losing clients. I think buyer agents don't. I think if you don't bring value to the relationship, you get squeezed. But if you're great at what you do, this is why my books, I write about how to be a great agent.
Yeah.
If you're a great real estate agent and you do great work for your clients, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, plumbers don't, you know, even like the travel agents, because everyone's right. I think if you wrote about the, I don't know, it was Inman that wrote, oh yeah, and the less object lesson of the travel agent getting driven out of business. Travel agents are still around. They don't book your flight to Dallas anymore. They book your big cruise or your honeymoon or your vacation, your destination wedding or something like that. They book the big stuff. You know, they evolved to, and I think that's the same thing that happened to the real estate industry. If one of these long tail events happens, something catastrophic happens like the North, they'll evolve and we'll find something else. We'll find a new way to be successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, man. So we're an hour and a half. This is so awesome. But so let me ask you this as kind of a way to exit us out. What's next for BPP? You know, what's your vision for where BPP goes next? I mean, obviously you're working very hard at getting 100% coverage. Say achieve that. Where do you want to take this organization?
I think that one of the things that I think is in the air is the idea that BPP would expand its portfolio to focus on building tools that only a nonprofit would build for the industry. That there are things that brokers need, there are things that agents need, that there's not so much of a profit incentive to build it. So you wouldn't want to necessarily put it on Homesnap, and Homesnap should build this because there may not be money in it. But BPP now, because of its JV, its relationship with Homesnap, has built up enough of a kind of a war chest that it could invest in either buying or building tools that would make the industry better, provide better experiences to consumers, but might not be incentivized. I mean, I've said for a long time that one of the things that's so frustrating to me as somebody in the industry who cares about customer service is that so much innovation, energy, and money goes into the lead generation. Like, all the money goes into the websites, and the websites are really good. They're much better than they used to be, but they're all still doing what they were doing 20 years ago, which is they're designed to generate leads, to generate buyer leads. And they're not designed to facilitate the transaction. Like, once you sign an agreement to buy a house, you don't go to your broker website anymore because there's nothing there. It's just inventory. Like, you're not interested in the inventory anymore. Is there a website that will help me, manage the process from going from contract to closing? No one's ever built that because there's not as much money in it. There's money in lead gen. Opcity became a $250 million company in 3 years by just perfecting lead gen, whole process for lead gen. That's where the money is. The money's not in like, we're going to make the transaction 20% more efficient. So I wonder whether or not there's an opportunity for BPP to build, Homesnap adjacent tools, like tools that would work with Homesnap, because that's our deal with Homesnap.
Sure.
Like, that's our horse. That would build stuff or be involved with stuff that would make the industry better. Because I think that BPP should expand beyond just, a portal. And that's, it's a little bit misleading, our name, broker public portal. Like, we're not just about brokers, and we really shouldn't just be about portals.
Right.
And we're not really a public entity. We should be about really all three words. None of the three words really work. I wasn't there. I didn't make up the name. It always struck me. I make the joke that the name always strikes me as being a working title that they came up with. All right, we're just going to call it the broker. It'll be a broker public portal. We'll come up with the name later, and then they just ran out of time. And
you know what you got to just switch every word to the opposite. Make it the industry private network.
I don't know.
That probably describes it better. Industry.
Yeah, but
private
that sounds
network.
Sinister. That sounds so sinister. I wouldn't like that at all.
How about the industry private cabal? Cabal.
No, we have to come up with. I'm going to put your Yell intellect to think of three words, but they have to start with BPP. Okay. 3 words that we can use. You don't have to do it now.
Okay.
You can submit it later, maybe in the show notes to the podcast. We can come up with, here's the answer to the question. I will say. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I will say that what BPP has become, its role is as the stamp of approval for endorsing best practices and saying, okay, Homesnap's adhering to these best practices, which are articulated in the Fair Display guidelines. But there's other things that BPP could endorse and other areas that it could get into as it's a collaboration of brokers and MLSs, and it speaks to the interests of the industry as a whole in a way that NAR is supposed to do as well, and NAR does, but it's just another voice to do it in a different way than NAR does. And I think that's what BPP could become. That's one avenue. That's one possible future for BPP is the way I would put it.
All right. I have a thought that if you're going to go down that road, talk about lack of a profit motive, right? I think the BPP should offer liability insurance to MLSs.
I don't even know what that would mean. Why liability insurance for
multiple listing services? Because they're getting it through NAR.
You'll have to talk about that offline because I'm going to need lots of education about it. I don't want to reveal to your audience how ignorant I am about what you're talking about. So let me just say, cut everything else and just have me say, wow, that's really interesting, Rob, but we should talk about it privately because
sounds good.
That we don't want to reveal too much here on the podcast.
Sounds good.
Save something for later.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right, and so that's BPP. Where you're. What about you? Are you going to finish this book about customer service?
I'm afraid now. I'm very superstitious. I feel that if I go somewhere to try to start this book, that I'm going to wreak havoc on the universe. Like something is going to happen.
Facebook acquires
CoStar. Oh, damn it! I got to turn around again. Back to the office. I'm never going to get away. You think I'm joking, Rob? I'll tell you one quick story. Years ago, I go into the office. I used to go into the office every day when in my brokerage role. Every day I would go into the office, and every day I wore at least a collared shirt like this. Every day. Never wore a, just a, a polo shirt. One beautiful day in 2008, I decide it's just too nice. It's too hot. I don't feel like putting on a shirt. Laundry wasn't done. I put on like a polo shirt and I go into the office. And that's the day that our main bank at our mortgage company announced bankruptcy that morning. So every loan we had in the pipeline was now done. Oof. So I had to go around to every office and just explain, don't worry, we're going to place these loans, figure it out. So I had to go, to 15 different offices. So at every one of these offices, I show up and I'm wearing, basically a t-shirt, which is not my brand, not my image. And I'm like, you trust the guy who comes in and says, don't worry, your loan is safe. If he's at least wearing a tie or a dress shirt, he looks like, he looks like Grant. Grant looks good. Yeah. People are going to listen to Grant. Grant comes in and says, don't worry, your loan is fine. Everybody believes you. You walk in looking like Han right now, like Rob with the little V-neck. They're like, we're dead. We got to move our loan to another bank. So I never wore. I will tell you this, that was 12 years ago. I have never gone into the office in a polo shirt again. So I am never going down to my Jersey storehouse to write that book because I don't know what's going to happen to Homesnap if I leave the house. Superstitious, Rob.
Oh, man. All right. Well,
so I don't know. I'm going to try to write it. Try to get it done in 2021 to publish 22. That's what I'm going to try. Somewhere I'm going to try to write it.
I'm going to have to put you in touch with.
This thing I want to tell.
I'm going to have to put you in touch with my brother, Albert. Because he's like totally fascinated by this, and his whole thing is Americans don't actually understand customer service because he spent 15 years in Korea, right? And he talks about that. So it'd be interesting for you guys to just have that conversation.
I'd love to talk to him. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Come touch him. Perfect.
But anyway, so I wish you were a little bit, high energy. Like, you're just so laid back and,
Only for you, Rob. Only for you. I only get excited talking to you.
It's so amazing. All right. That's what base the conversation, man. Otherwise we're going to start talking about politics and stuff. We don't want to do that.
We don't want to do that. No, we don't want to do that. That doesn't work. If people think we disagree about the future of
my gosh.
CoStar, they should hear us talk about. They should hear us talk about our different views on politics. I'm not even
my God, yeah.
Where we are, but yes, but I respect. But you know what's great is we can always talk. We can always talk respectfully and intelligently, and I learn something every time I talk to you. And so
I learned something. This is a real pleasure.
All right.
So
thanks, Rob.
Hey, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they find you? What's your Twitter handle?
You can on Twitter, I'm Joseph Rand. You can find my website at joerand.com. My email, I'll just give out my email. My email is joe@joerand.com. Just email me if you have a question, comment, and you can find my books anywhere books are sold online, including Amazon. Yeah. Just look me up, Joe Rand. You can buy as many copies as you can possibly afford.
And for any brokers MLS franchise, seriously, you need a speaker. You want this guy. You want this guy, and give him a lot of money, pay him a shit ton of money so he could invest in some broadcast quality stuff, not have to just rely on his AirPod.
I got my AirPod. I have a really expensive Mac here. I got a boom mic. Look, I got him.
There you go.
This is a really expensive mic. It doesn't work. It stopped working. So now I'm relying on his earbuds, and I'm taking them out because they're running out of juice every 10 minutes. Like you have to shift him out. Yes, this is very embarrassing.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling attention to it. Hour and a half we've been talking. Now you're going to finally say, by the way, Joe's earbuds keep going out and he keeps losing sound.
No, I just hear an amazing speaker, a great author, a great human being, just super smart, and an amazing singer. Like we can't
thank you, Rob. So I'm looking forward to doing events again. We'll run into each other on the road like we sometimes do.
Look forward.
Always
to
a pleasure. In fact, one of my last meals in a restaurant was with you in Niagara Falls. And
that's right.
Early March, we had dinner.
At
the Canada thing.
Yeah. Hopefully, hopefully sooner rather than later. That'd be great.
Yeah, hopefully soon. That'd be great. All my best. My best to Sonny. Thank you, Grant. Thank you,
Joe.
Rob.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy.